Hello, you beautiful people. So, if you're seeing this video, it probably means that this guy just got drip marketed, and I already know that a lot of you guys are probably interested in him. So today, I'm mainly going to talk about all the info that we currently have on Anaxa's kit. Along with this, I'm also going to go over the info related to his playstyle, his insane synergy with the Herta, and his overall value for your account because trust me, his kit is kind of insane. Also, continuing the custom just like I did for castorice yesterday, I want to ask you guys, how do you feel about his drip marketing and his design? Personally, I like how elegant he looks in his drip marketing pose, and I have to say, for some reason, I really like the design of his eye patch as well. Before we go on though, if you're planning to pull for the Herta or the rerunning units in version 3.0, you might want to check out Lubar because on this site, you can save up to a total of 23% on all your purchases. Just as an example, I'll buy this 3280 Oniric Shard pack for $43, and this same pack costs me about $50 from the in-game shop. You can see that it's cheaper, right? The top-up process is honestly really easy as well because all you need to do is enter your UID in this box and choose your respective server depending on your account. After waiting for a few minutes, I received my Jades with the double top-up bonus because it was my first purchase and saved a decent amount of money. Also, other than HSR, you can top up on Genshin as well using Lubar, and both of these games have quite a lot of 5-star reviews. Lastly, if you use my link which is in the description or the pinned comment, you can get an extra 8% off on top of all the other discounts, so do keep that in mind. Anyways, moving on, let me just mention the usual disclaimer that this version of his kit is not the final one, and you'll most likely see some new mechanics when his actual kit gets released, so take all this info with a grain of salt. With that being said, let's begin without wasting any more of your time or energy. Okay, starting with the basics just like we always do, I think some of you guys know that we've cycled through a lot of different elements, and even a different path for Anaxa because at the start, he was supposedly an ice-type unit who followed the path of nihility. Now though, as we can clearly see from his drip marketing, he is going to be a wind-type unit who follows the path of Erudition. Honestly, I really like the fact that they changed his element because personally, I feel like the wind element suits his overall design way more, and it's also been a while since we've had a wind-type unit. Also, if I try to explain his kit in a very short summary, I guess I can basically say that his kit is just an insanely upgraded version of Silverwolf's kit, and he is going to be the best in slot Erudition partner for the Herta. We'll discuss more on that topic later on though in the Team Synergies section, so don't worry about it right now. Moving on, I know a lot of you guys want to know his release date just so you can plan out your savings, and if we go by the drip marketing pattern, his banner will be featured in the second half of patch 3.2. Basically, if the current patch schedule remains the same, his banner is going to be released on April 30th for all the different time zones. Yep, I just want to say that you have all the time in the world to start saving for him right now. Alright, with the basics being done, let's finally take a look at all the detailed info that we have on his kit as of now. So, first of all, let's start with his talent because I feel like it's probably the most interesting and the most important part about his entire kit. Basically, this guy's talent is just straight up way better than Silverwolf's entire selling point because it makes it so that whenever he uses any one of his abilities on an enemy, Anaxa implants a random weakness on this particular target. Now, I know this already sounds really good, but this talent gets even more interesting because looking closely, I don't think there is an upper limit on the amount of weaknesses that he can implant on an enemy. If you're somewhat confused what I meant by that, I'm essentially saying that Anaxa might be able to apply all the 7 different weaknesses on an enemy at the same time. Yep, I told you his kit is kind of insane because honestly, there is literally no character in the entire game who would not benefit from a weakness implant as it's a universally good mechanic. Next up, taking a look at the other parts of his kit, namely his basic attack and his skill, I would say his basic attack isn't really worth discussing because just like most of the other basics, his basic is also very generic and says something along the lines of, this ability deals wind damage to a single target and that's it. For a team like the Hertas where everyone prefers to use their skill, you would think that he may have to use his basic to recover his skill points, but he has a way around this, which we'll talk about later. Talking about his skill though, this ability is actually pretty interesting and in functionality, I would say that it works quite similarly to the Herta's enhanced skill. Basically, his skill deals damage in 2 different instances, where the first part deals wind damage to the enemies in an AoE radius. Now, as for the second part, this part also deals additional wind damage to all the enemies, But the catch here is that this ability deals damage in a bounce type radius rather than an AoE one. Overall, I think his skill is pretty simple and it will most likely deal a decent bit of damage. Also, this should allow Anaxa to perfectly fulfill the sub-DPS role in a lot of different teams, and other than that, this skill will be useful to generate extra stacks of interpretation and energy for the Herta. But I think that's pretty obvious by now. Anyways, moving on and taking a look at the last part of his base kit, which is obviously going to be his ultimate. Now, just like his talent, his ultimate is actually pretty interesting because it's mostly focused around enabling Anaxa's out-of-turn damage, letting him contribute to the team outside of his own actions. So, an unnamed status gets applied on all the enemies whenever you use his ultimate, and this status makes it so that whenever an ally on your team attacks any enemy, Anaxa will deal a little bit of additional wind damage to this particular target. Yep, you can think of this additional damage as something similar to Robin's additional damage, which just tells us that this damage won't be a lot, but it will be triggered extremely often, and at the end, it will turn out to be a really meaningful source of damage. Other than applying this field, Anaxa also delays the action value of all the enemies upon using his ultimate and deals wind damage in an AoE radius. With that though, we're totally done discussing his base kit, and just to give a small recap, Anaxa is basically a sub-DPS type unit, who will provide some buffs to your team in the form of additional damage, and all of his other abilities will most likely deal a decent bit of damage as well. Next up, taking a very quick look at his traces, almost all of them are mainly focused around buffing Anaxa's personal damage, but his third trace is actually something that changes his playstyle by a lot, so let's go over it. Okay, this trace literally turns Anaxa's skill into an enhanced skill upon meeting a certain condition, and this condition wants him to attack an enemy who has all the 7 weaknesses applied onto it. Now, this enhanced skill of his does not consume any skill points, which as I explained earlier is really nice for characters like the Herta with an extremely skill point hungry team, and it also increases the bounces of the skill, making his personal damage even better than it already is. Also, this trace confirms 2 of the most important things about his kit, with the first one being that Anaxa does have the ability to make an enemy have all the 7 weaknesses applied onto it. Now, the other important thing is that, if Anaxa does end up having a lot of enhanced skills, it just means his personal damage will be very good, which is really nice for all the people out there who want to play him as a main DPS. Alright, at this point, I think you probably have a really good idea on how Anaxa's kit works, so let's finally take a look at the last topic of this video, which is related to his team synergies. Okay, first of all, talking about the most obvious synergy which I've been hinting at throughout the entire video, and this synergy is of course going to be Anaxa and the Herta. Both of these characters buff each other because the Herta will provide Anaxa with an extra 80% crit damage due to her talent, and on the other hand, Anaxa will also buff Erudition units in his team upon meeting a certain condition. But we have no idea what this buff does for now. Overall, all of his abilities are AoE, and since his skill is split up into 2 parts, it might let him generate double the interpretation stacks for the Herta, which is kind of insane. Also, he also gets an extra enhanced skill which, as I mentioned earlier, doesn't consume skill points, and just helps the Herta in building up her interpretation stacks even more. All in all, I can very confidently say that Anaxa is going to be the Herta's best and slot teammate by far. Other than the Herta though, you can pair him up with characters who wants debuffs like Ratio and Acheron, but I don't think he'll be able to outperform a proper support in those teams. Lastly, you can also try to play him as a main DPS, and because he scales off attack, I'm guessing his supports will be the classic trio of Sunday, Robin, and Huohuo. Anyways, with that, we're done discussing the preliminary kit of Anaxa, and honestly, I think I like his kit quite a lot, and he'll fit in my account perfectly with the Herta, so I'm definitely going to start saving my jades to pull for this guy. Also, don't forget that he is an anniversary unit just like castorice, so the chances of him having a great kit is quite high. I want to ask though, how do you guys feel about his kit, and are you going to pull for him, or maybe you're skipping him? Also, if you did end up watching until the end, thanks, and you might want to consider subscribing as well. With that being said, I just want to say I really love y'all, and I will see you in another one.